Hey there, welcome to the DFS Build NBA edition. I'm Kevin Roberts, joined with Taylor Smith and perhaps my cat meowing in the background. You may hear him and you may not. So yesterday was not great. We get another 2-game slate just like we had yesterday. Certainly had some good calls. We liked Bobby Portis. I know, Taylor, you like Najee Marshall if he was in and PJ Washington was out. It's exactly what happened. So if you did that, you can thank Taylor.
I also
you can
liked Grimes if he was out, and Grimes didn't do a damn thing. So.
Oh, well, hey. I was just about to say, you can also thank us for telling you that we didn't really like Jalen Suggs. So he got 50 fantasy points as chalk. So oops. And then I really liked Luka and Giannis together, and Luka just was not worth it whatsoever. SGA was a smash. You were all over SGA you preferred him over Luka. So that was correct. So yeah, it is what it is. You do not have much room for error on a 2-game slate. We had some good calls. We had some bad calls. It's onward and upward. No matter the case, our goal here is to always to help you guys win, and we just look at each slate for what it is, and we look at the plays we like, and we tell you what we want to do, and hopefully that helps you out. If it does, smash that like button so we can keep putting out videos like this. We try to do it every single weekday for the NBA, sometimes on Saturday, and we also try to hit the NFL slates, main slate, and of course the showdown slates when we are able. Also subscribe to the channel so you get alerted to all those videos, and then you can just become more part of the community. Once we get a bigger slate here, we might do another contest on DraftKings, but a 2-gamer, I don't think so. But anyways, I'm going to continue to play light until this NBA Cup crap is over. Friday, we get a regular slate back. I think even Thursday we get more than 2 games, don't we?
Yeah, we get 3.
Oh, now we're really cooking with gas. All right, here we go. Let's go position by position and talk about the slate. Taylor, up top is Jalen Brunson with a 46-point fantasy projection, only 8.5K. He is mega chalk. Right there with him, with basically the same projection as Trae Young. He does cost almost $1,000 more, but he's coming in at half the ownership. Why don't we start there? Do you think Brunson is a must on this slate, or do you have any interest in Trae?
Certainly don't think he's a must. I'm coming in under the field right now. I have him at like 45% ownership, and of the lineups I'm building right now, I only have him in like 15%. So that's a little bit frightening, but in general, he hasn't shown as high of a ceiling with Towns in the lineup this year. Matchup's good, of course, but I don't mind Trae Young on the other side. I feel like his ceiling is arguably higher than Brunson's when the Knicks are pretty much healthy. They may not be. Josh Hart's questionable. If Josh Hart is out, maybe Brunson looks a little bit better to me. He does get a 3.6% usage boost without Hart, oddly enough. So I would like to get more Brunson than I have now. As of now, though, I have a pretty firm stance that's pro Trae Young and anti Brunson.
Hey, guess what? We are aligned. Because, I mean, Brunson's a good play, no doubt about it. He's a good price, good projection, same projection as Trae, and the Hawks are a better matchup than the Knicks are. But as we've alluded to many other slates, the Knicks are not as nasty of a defensive matchup as they were last year, specifically out on the perimeter. I think they're ranked 20th in 3-point percentage allowed. So it's not great, and that is good news for Trae Young. Trae Young just has, at least right now, he has the higher ceiling. Like, there's a easier path to a massive ceiling. And by the way, the other day, I think we were not very high on Trae, and he got like 72 fantasy points. So that is just Trae Young in a nutshell. But by the way, the game before that, he had 30, and like 2 games before that, he had 26. So it is tough to trust, but the ceiling is massive with Trae Young. So I'm with you. I do prefer Trae, especially when you factor in ownership. I just think he's a more compelling play. You could definitely play Jalen Brunson if you're putting on a lot of lineups tonight. I don't know why you would do that on a 2-game slate, but if you are, definitely get a lot of exposure to Brunson. But if we're only doing a few lineups or a single entry, I am very, very interested in pivoting to Trae for $1,000 more. But I also don't mind playing them together, and then maybe you get different elsewhere. Stephen Curry is right there as far as price goes with Trae Young. The projection's a little bit under both those guys, and he's not going to be owned at all compared to them on a 2-game slate. Do you have any interest in Chef Curry?
As of now, I have about the same amount of Curry and Brunson. I do think Curry's overpriced for the matchup, especially, but it's a cup game. Potentially, the Warriors could tighten their rotation a bit. Naturally, Curry's the guy you feel best about to begin with. If there's potential for him to play 36, 37 minutes, I think that makes him look a little bit better. And on a tiny slate, like, I'm certainly not going to cut a guy like that out of my player pool. I think that's someone you should be looking at playing, assuming he's lower owned than the others.
Yeah, 100%. I don't think, if we're just being logical here, obviously Curry is not as good of a play as Trey or Brunson. Realistically, Brunson does blow them both out of the water, but that's why he's going to be super owned. So because of that ownership, I will have interest in Curry, just less interest in him than I do in Trey. FVV, Fred VanVleet, he looks pretty good minutes and fantasy projection, only 7.3K. Because of that, he is carrying ownership. The matchup with the Warriors is not great, but the price point and the role and everything does look pretty good. So I don't mind getting to him. I just don't know if I really like that ownership. Where are you at with FVB?
I'm fine with it. You can't really get away from ownership easily on this slate. So Curry's under owned, but it's not like he's going to be 1% on a 2-game slate. So I don't really get too tied down with ownership on slates like these. Like, you just kind of play the best plays and hope that it works out for you. It's worth noting that VanVleet, Trae Young, and Brunson all have questionable starting teammates. Şengün, Josh Hart, and Jalen Johnson. So, like, if those guys are out, Brunson, Trae Young, or VanVleet are in theory going to see more usage. So they're fine plays now that could look better by the time the lock times roll around.
Yeah, and to the ownership point, I mean, I think like it just is like Brunson and Fred VanVleet are just going to be really, really owned. So you can eat. There is enough value that you can definitely eat the extra salary and not feel too weird about it. With Trey, Steph, I feel like, I don't know. Steph is a little bit harder to feel really good about. He just, even with like when guys have been out and stuff, he has not really consistently gone off. That isn't really anything that's too that necessarily predicts anything for us. But I think just if there's going to be the same price, Trey is just a better play there. But Fred VanVleet looks good. I don't have a problem with him. Just don't know if I'm going to prioritize him on this slate. As far as value goes, Miles McBride looks really good at 4.1K. He's going to get 25 to maybe even 30 minutes off the bench. He has decent usage off the bench. He's going to be very owned, but this is another Jalen Suggsy type option where, like, I do not care that he's going to be owned. I think he's a really good value, and by the looks of it, he's the best point guard value on the slate.
Yeah, and he could look better if Hart sits out. I assume he'd be the guy who would potentially see a boost in minutes, even if he doesn't start. I'm not really sure how to play that because the Knicks run such a tight rotation to begin with. It's kind of hard to figure out what they're going to do, but I assume they're just going to condense things even further with McBride getting a boost in minutes. So with or without Hart, he's a good value. You can say the same of Payne, a little bit cheaper. Minutes floor is a lot lower, but very good per minute player, over a fantasy point per minute on the season. Tiny slate, good matchup against Atlanta. I think he's fine. And Podziemski got benched in the last game. They started Buddy over him. So that's a very volatile situation. And this is the second game on the slate. So hard to know what to do. Podziemski is probably not going to see a ton of minutes regardless of whether he starts, but he's affordable in an uncertain situation. I think if you leave some spots open for that second game, you can kind of pivot accordingly.
Yeah. I just think the pod thing is a little bit dicey. I don't think I'm going to do that, especially since he's pushing 5K. I think he's a little bit too expensive for the risk he is going to be carrying. There's other Warriors guys that are cheaper and feel like I'd rather risk it with them than him. I think he's in play. If he's actually going to hit the 22-minute projection, then he's fine. But at 4.8K, I would much rather just take the $700 in savings and go get McBride. I hear you on campaign as well if Hart is out. Hart has not missed a game all year. It's a massive game for them. I mean, if they care about the NBA Cup. So I don't really think Hart's going to miss. So I think it's a moot point. But if he is out, I think you can consider Payne at 3.3. But again, I'd rather just go get Miles McBride there. All right, over at shooting guard, it is bad out there, my friends. Jalen Green is the best shooting guard play as far as projection goes, 33-point fantasy projection. He's going to carry ownership. He's only a 6.5K. Hey, we know he does have a ceiling. He's just as pretty scoring dependent. And if Houston's at full strength, he can have a low floor because there's other guys there. Fred VanVleet and Şengün obviously take up a lot of usage. So I think he's okay at 6.5K. He looks a lot better if Şengün is out. I'd make him a bit of a priority at that point. I kind of prefer Mikal Bridges in a similar price range. Way more minutes, way better matchup, possibly more usage with Hart out if that does happen. And he's cheaper at 6K flat. Dyson Daniels' price is ticking up and his projection is not amazing, but we know he is still a viable option, especially on 2-game slate. And then there is Aman Thompson at 6.3K. I think if Şengün misses, he becomes more interesting. But I probably up top, I'm really just looking at Mikal Bridges. I don't love this price range because there's a lot of high mid-range guys to look at on the slate. And I don't really gravitate towards Jalen or Daniels here. I think it's Mikal or bust up top at shooting guard.
Yeah, he might be the most owned player on the slate, but it's hard to get away from a guy who might play 45 minutes in a regulation game who's 6K flat with guard forward eligibility, so maximum number of positions you can play him in. Very obvious play. If Hart's out, he looks better, but I'm playing him no matter what. Like, it's very hard to get away from him on this slate. I think Green's fine. Daniels maybe okay. Amen, not really on my radar. Priced at a premium here. Buddy Hield is the good value here. He started the last game, played 35 minutes. I don't know if they'll do that again. They're very unpredictable with their rotations, but if he starts, you can make a case he's the best cheap play on the slate. If he doesn't start, he might play 13 minutes. So very dicey situation. I think just slotting in Podziemski and pivoting to Buddy, if Buddy starts over Podziemski, is the way to do it, since Podziemski is the more expensive player. But yeah, there's not a lot to like here once you get past Bridges, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think Buddy Hield is in play no matter what because he's only 4.5K, but he's less appealing when you remember that Andrew Wiggins was not in that game, that he went off and got all those minutes. So I think he's still viable because it's a 2-game slate and he's not that expensive. I don't feel like super good about him. I think he's a better play than Podziemski, but not by a lot. And if you look at the projections for minutes and fantasy points, it agrees, I think, with that sentiment. Not really interested in anybody else here unless we get a surprise inactive. I guess Lindy Waters.
The one more would be Bogdanovic, who I think is questionable.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's questionable. Sorry about that.
He's 4.9, so good play if he's in, obviously.
No, he's a better play than both those guys. If he's in, he's been getting really good minutes. Obviously, his good usage. 29 minutes, 29 fantasy points in his last game. He has a little bit of a ceiling if he can get going. So I agree. I only didn't mention him because he was questionable, but obviously still worth mentioning. 4.9K. He's also small forward eligible. So he is one of my favorite values on the slate. Just going to depend on if he actually plays. I would imagine he does, but keep an eye on that. And I was going to say Lindy Waters, the third at 3.5K. If they have an injury and the Warriors need a body at 3.5, I don't think it's the worst dive on this tiny slate. He did play a lot in his last game. Again, Wiggins was out and Wiggins is expected back. So he probably is off my radar, but worth noting if they don't have somebody. At small forward, Josh Hart leads the way if he's in. I think he's fine just because he plays like most of the game, and he does have a ceiling with all his blocks and steal upside. I don't love the 7.1K price, but if he's in, he is definitely in play. I kind of prefer OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges, though, on the same team. They also get a ton of minutes, and they're about $1,000 cheaper each. So that's probably where I'm at. Andrew Wiggins is back. The matchup is not amazing. 6.6K for Andrew Wiggins. Doesn't feel great. Not the worst play in the world on 2-game slate, but not one that I really want to do. So I think I'm looking, if I'm going to pay at small forward, I think it's going to be sliding Mikal Bridges there, or I'm going to go OG there.
Yeah, I'm more likely to play Bridges at shooting guard. So OG is my play here as well. I think I'm going to set a rule to get no more than 2 of those secondary Knicks starters into a lineup. I think an optimizer might try to give you all 3 of them, which is not bad, but if that's the way most of the field is building with Hart, Bridges, and Anunoby, I think a way to differentiate yourself would be to play 2 of them. Anunoby and Bridges are cheaper, therefore they're the ones I'm getting to more. I think Hart is fine, but he's super expensive and questionable. So who knows? Fine play either way. Otherwise, I am pretty much exclusively paying down here. There's not really anything to pay up for, but there is a lot of pretty good value in the 5K range, I think.
Very much so. And I don't think. I mean, there is something that exists that is too many Knicks for sure, because one of them isn't going to work out at least. But I don't mind playing them together or playing those 2 guys and Brunson or Cat as long as Hart is out. Like, as long as we're definitely getting a few more minutes or a little bit more usage, circulating around, I think that is fine.
I think
Yeah,
you can play two of them with the high usage guys. I was just
yeah,
saying
yeah.
max two of the wings who
Okay,
kind of
yeah,
eat into
sure.
each other. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So you're, by the way, very right about the value here. Lots to like. Tari Eason at 5.2K, high usage off the bench. He looks good. A smash play if Şengün is out. He is good. He's fine anyways at 5.2K. I like him no matter what. DeAndre Hunter at 5.8 feels a little bit rich unless Boggy is out. If Bogdanovic sits,
Or
Hunter
Johnson.
looks. Yep, and Jalen Johnson. So I think DeAndre Hunter would be a smash play if either of those guys missed. I think he's okay at 5.8K if they're in, but not a priority for me if that's the case. My favorite value at this position is Dylan Brooks at 4.4K. He's going to get all the minutes, not a high usage guy, not a high ceiling, but if he's going to play, push for 35 minutes out on the wing, trying to slow down Steph Curry, I like it. I think he's one of the best values on the board.
Yeah, I think Eason is a kind of a smash for me either way, regardless of Şengün. Just 5'2", he's a lot cheaper than Amen Thompson. He's coming back from a concussion, so in theory shouldn't be limited. They're going to need his defense in this matchup. It just kind of caters to his game perfectly. I think he's an awesome play.
Yeah.
Hunter, I'm always getting to a lot. I continue to think he's underprojected by the industry. He's getting more expensive, but he should be. Even if everyone's in Bogdanovic and Jalen Johnson, I think he's playable off the bench. I think Brooks is fine. I think Reese Shea is really interesting too. The cheapest of the Atlanta wing pieces at 4.3. Not a great per minute guy, but the minutes are typically okay, and he's cheap, and he's not going to be owned. If Bogdanovic and or Johnson are out, his minutes should come up. So I think he's a pretty interesting value either way. And then, Wiggins is pretty expensive. Thompson's pretty expensive, but they're both playable.
Yeah, I agree. On a 2-game slate, you can play them. I just don't really want to. I will say the Tari Eason thing, I'm with you 100%. The only issue is Jonathan Kuminga looks really good right now. And at 5.4K, it's going to be really tough to argue for fewer minutes with Tari Eason if Şengün is in and not playing Kuminga. I really like Kuminga. We'll talk about him in a second.
Simply play them together.
Yeah, you can, but I don't know if you necessarily have to either. I don't have a problem with it. That's for sure. All right. So power forward, Jalen Johnson leads the way with a 41-point fantasy projection. Looks like one of the better plays of the slate. Only 8.3K. His price keeps coming down. He's not very owned because the presence of Steph, Cat, and Trey and Brunson. So he's just kind of getting overlooked here. The only question is he going to play? So he's questionable. If he's in, I like him quite a bit. If he's out, those other guys that we talked about, things open up a little bit more for them. Josh Hart comes with the second best projection at this position. I think we're both kind of out on Hart for the most part. Obviously, you got to keep him in your player pool. If you get there, that's fine. I just don't think it's a priority. We talked about everybody. The only new guy is the one I just mentioned, Jonathan Kuminga, and of course, I guess Draymond Green too at 6.7. I'm not paying almost 7K for Draymond Green, but Jonathan Kuminga at 5.4 looks really, really good. One of my favorite values of the entire slate.
Yeah, if he starts, I'll feel good about it. That's not a certainty. They change the lineup all the time. It could be Wiggins in for him, something like that. He started over Draymond a couple of games ago. Then Draymond came back and started next to him. So it's volatile. He's going to be popular, of course, on a 2-game slate. I think there are more downsides than the ownership might indicate. But yeah, like if he starts, I feel pretty good about it. Anunoby, Hunter, Tari, Jalen Johnson, I think Trae Young is just the better play, and that's the Hawks spend I'm going to prioritize, even with the discount on Jalen. The matchup for Trae is just better, I think, and Johnson's kind of dealing with an injury, so not my favorite way to spend on this slate.
Yeah, Jabari Smith is worth noting, 5.3K for a lot of minutes. I think if you just want to play the minutes angle or maybe leverage the Tari Eason ownership if it gets out of control, or even the Kuminga ownership, I think Jabari is an okay play. And one punt that it could be all right would be Precious Achiuwa at 3.6. His minutes are not safe, but I mean, pretty good bet for 15, 20 minutes off the bench, especially if Hart is out. Maybe he gets in the rotation a little bit more. All right.
Indeed.
At center, we have Cat leading the way with a 55-point fantasy projection. He is my favorite spend of the entire slate. One of the big reasons why I do not mind getting away from Brunson. I just don't really like, paying for 2 studs from the same team on the same slate. I don't think it makes much sense. There usually is not a lot of direct correlation aside from, a team crushing another team, and they both benefit. But the odds are, if one's going to hit the ceiling, the other one probably isn't. Certainly, that is not always going to be the case, but over time, it's probably so. So I think I'm going to go Cat instead of Brunson most of the time here. Don't mind his ownership. Everything looks good for him. Şengün is second with almost a 50-point fantasy projection. I think he's okay if he's in. I just don't really like the price, and I don't really like the matchup. So I'm not really super excited to pay for Şengün. If I'm paying up at center, it's 100% going to be Cat. I don't have any interest in Draymond Green. Clint Capella is fine at 5.7, just not much of a ceiling. I kind of prefer Okongwu if I'm going to play a Hawks center at 4.7K. He's another solid value that I do like. So what else do you see in here at center?
Really, the only name would be Looney. He's cheap. He's very good per minute. So even 20 minutes of him at 4K or whatever he is, I think that's a very good value. One of the best cheapies on the slate. Assuming he starts, someone I plan to build around tonight. Towns, obviously an awesome play. I'm going to have a lot more of him than Brunson. Şengün is fine. A little bit pricey, though. He's also questionable, so don't feel great about it. I agree with you on the Okongwu over Capella take. It could be a better matchup for Okongwu. Like Towns likes to stay on the perimeter. Capella likes to stay in the paint. Okongwu can defend outside the paint. So if they need someone to chase Towns around, I think Okongwu is probably more likely to be the guy. And under 5K, solid per minute guy, I think he's a very good value too.
Yeah, so Looney absolutely is good value at 4K. Good role lately, 20-plus minutes in each of his last 4 games. Here's the problem with Looney is, number one, he's going to be very owned. Number two, if Şengün is in, Şengün could deliver a negative impact for him in terms of rebounding and ease of scoring inside. And then also if Şengün is out, Houston might just go smaller, which is something also the Warriors can do too. So those are things I would consider. I think whether Şengün plays or not, I think Looney is a little bit risky.
If Şengün is out, I feel a lot worse about Looney because I agree that his minutes just might dry up completely.
Exactly. So I think the Şengün news is probably the most important news of the entire slate for Rockets value and usage, and also for the matchup for Golden State. So in a vacuum, yeah, Looney looks good at 4K. I just would definitely consider those things before clicking his name today. All right, that does it for our breakdown for this slate. Let's end with our flag plan and overall strategy tonight.
Yeah, I think limiting your number of Knicks is kind of the easy way to get different. Like, I still think you can play 4. I wouldn't go above 4. I wouldn't play more than 2 of the wings together, for example. And then it does currently look like a double center build is going to be pretty popular with Looney and Towns. So Okongwu, Şengün, guys like that are pretty decent ways to get different. And then Jabari, if Şengün is out, I think Jabari could see a lot more minutes. I think there's an outside chance he would start at center with Tari at the 4. So leave 2 or 3 at a minimum spots open for the late game, just so you can pivot according to the news.
Yeah. I think I'm going to go with what you were saying before. For a lot of these guys, especially the values, I'm just going to eat the chalk and not think twice. It is what it is. Yesterday, Cole Anthony didn't work out, but for the slate, Cole Anthony made a lot of sense. He was really cheap. He was getting increased usage. The Magic had a bunch of dead bodies. He didn't hit any freaking shots. That's what it was. They're like, why are we going to keep playing the scoring dude who is shooting 2 for 12? So they benched him. And then who's the other guy who came off the bench who hit like every shot? I can't remember because it's the Magic. But anyways, point is, I'm going to eat a lot of the value that's chalky. The one that I might not is going to be Looney. I'm going to monitor the Şengün situation. If he's out, I'm definitely out on Looney. Even if he's in, I'm going to be a little bit hesitant because of the ownership and because I do like other values on this slate. The other thing is I'm locked in on Cat, which has me not being locked in on Brunson. That might come back to bite me, but that's just my personal strategy for the slate. The other thing is going to be going way over on Trae Young and a little bit over on Steph Curry. I think if this slate gets down to, and we're looking at 10% Steph Curry to wrap things up, that would be kind of fun, I think. I mean, it is NBA Cup game. He's going to play much of the game. And even though the matchup and the projection and all that stuff doesn't look great, that kind of dude at no ownership is too good to pass up. I wouldn't be like crazy over him, but I would be much more than 10%. All right, that does it for us. Hopefully this helps you out. If it does, smash that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching and good luck.